In life, there are times when people suffer not from circumstances, but from the fire within themselves. Just a harsh word, a small misunderstanding, a moment of wounded pride is enough to cause resentment, harsh words, and uncontrolled actions. Some relationships break down because of a fit of anger. Some wrong decisions are made because of a moment of losing control. In Buddhism, anger is considered one of the greatest poisons of the mind, incredibly destructive yet often appearing quickly and subtly. In today's video, we will explore what anger means in Buddhism, why it is dangerous, how it manifests itself subtly in life, and how each person can recognize and transform it before it harms themselves and those around them. If you enjoy life lessons that help you find peace amidst the hustle and bustle of life, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to follow more meaningful content. In daily life, emotions arise so quickly that, without careful observation, we might mistake them for normal human reactions. A hurtful remark, a disrespectful glance, an unpleasant experience, someone behaving contrary to expectations. Just such a small touch can stir up a powerful wave of emotion. Sometimes it erupts into harsh words. Sometimes it transforms into cold indifference, uncomfortable silence, or lingering resentment. From a Buddhist perspective, this state of mind is called anger or hatred. In Buddhist philosophy, the term anger can be simply understood as a state of mind characterized by irritation, discomfort, anger, resentment, or strong resistance when things don't go as planned. Anger isn't just about outward displays of rage. It can also manifest as lingering resentment, coldness, discomfort, or even hidden hatred. It's important to understand that anger doesn't only appear when people are intensely furious. Many people think they aren't hot-tempered, so they probably don't get angry easily. But in reality, anger takes many more subtle forms. Some people don't yell, but harbor resentment for a long time. Some don't argue back, but silently distance themselves, become cold, or carry resentment for days, months, or even years. Some don't express it outwardly, but inwardly feel offended, unfairly treated, or unable to forgive someone. All these states are different manifestations of anger. Because anger can manifest itself so subtly, many people live with it for a long time without truly realizing it. We often only name it when it flares up intensely. But in reality, there are instances of anger that are not loud, or not violent, not seen by anyone, but silently weigh down our hearts day by day. Sometimes it's annoyance with a loved one that we don't express. Sometimes it's frustration with life because things don't go as planned. Sometimes it's the bitter feeling of being misunderstood. Sometimes it's a silent resistance to things we cannot accept. These forms of anger don't make a loud noise, but they are still powerful enough to disrupt inner peace. Why is anger considered one of the three poisons? Buddhism, greed, anger, and delusion are considered the three great roots of suffering. If greed is the desire to possess, then anger is the reaction when one does not achieve what one wants, or when the ego is hurt. Anger burns away peace, clouds reason, and easily leads people to say, do, and make wrong decisions. This is a very profound observation, because if we look closely, we will see that much suffering in life begins with anger that is not recognized and transformed. Anger often arises when something goes against our wishes. We want to be respected but are disregarded. We want to be loved but are treated coldly. We want things to go smoothly but encounter obstacles. We want others to understand us but are misunderstood. When what we want doesn't happen, or when our ego is hurt, anger easily arises. At that moment, anger is like a fire. It doesn't just burn others, but first and foremost, it burns oneself. When anger arises, the body tenses, breathing becomes heavier, and the mind narrows. It's very difficult for people to see things clearly when they're angry. Ordinary things can be interpreted in a worse light. Words can become sharper. Decisions can become hasty and extreme. Relationships can break down because of a few minutes of losing control of anger. Words can hurt for a lifetime because of a moment of not controlling one's anger. Wrong choices can stem from a mind consumed by dissatisfaction. It's worth noting that anger doesn't usually come alone. It's often accompanied by the ego. Often what makes us angry isn't necessarily the big deal itself, but rather the feeling of being hurt, disrespected, denied, opposed, or not getting what we want. When the ego feels threatened, anger often erupts as a self-defense mechanism. Therefore, if we only look at anger on the surface, we might think we're angry because the other person is wrong. because the circumstances are terrible, or because life is unfair. But if we look deeper, we often see that beneath the anger lies a hurting ego, an unfulfilled desire, or an unhealed wound. That's also why anger clouds reason. When consumed by anger, people can no longer see the true nature of things. We see everything through the layer of burning emotions within. And when reason is clouded, many wrong words, actions, and decisions are more likely to occur. Some people say things they later regret because of anger. Some people cut off relationships that could have been saved because of anger. Some people lose their image, reputation, or even opportunities because of anger. Some people don't explode outwardly, but hold on to their anger for so long that they live in weariness, bitterness, and heaviness for many years. Buddhism views anger as a poison, not to label people as bad, but to point out that if it is not recognized and transformed, it will first poison one's own mind. Those who harbor anger often think they are holding on to the faults of others, but in reality they themselves are carrying that fire through each day. The other person may have forgotten, the circumstances may have passed. But if anger remains in the heart, one's peace will not return. The profound point here is that Buddhism doesn't just teach people not to be angry, because that's too simplistic and impractical. What it emphasizes is understanding anger. Understanding where it originates, how it grows, and where it's leading you. Only when you understand anger can you begin to be able to avoid being controlled by it. And perhaps the first step in transforming anger isn't about trying to appear meek or suppressing emotions to the point of suffocation, but about being honest enough to recognize that within ourselves there are areas very prone to anger, or places very easily provoked. There are deep-seated desires that, when unmet, immediately cause discomfort. Only when we dare to look at this without deceiving ourselves can we begin to step out of the silent power of anger. Understanding anger is understanding a very real part of human nature. And from there, we have the opportunity to live more mindfully, more lightly, and cause less suffering to ourselves and others on our journey through life. Many people, upon hearing the word anger, immediately picture someone hot-tempered, prone to shouting, easily angered, and prone to losing control in public or in relationships. Therefore, many believe that if they don't often raise their voices, bang on tables, or engage in heated arguments, they don't possess much anger. However, if we look at it from a deeper Buddhist perspective and carefully observe our inner lives, we will see that anger is not so simple. There are people who rarely show their anger outwardly, but inwardly carry a great deal of anger that they themselves cannot properly name. Anger isn't just about being hot-tempered. Many people think they don't yell or scold, so they don't experience it. But in reality, anger takes many subtle forms. Some people don't say anything but hold on to it, becoming cold, irritable, sarcastic, or silently distant. These are also manifestations of anger, only they don't erupt but simmer for a long time. This is crucial for identification, because many people fail to control the situation not because they are overly aggressive, but because they are too accustomed to close-off environments. Some people don't argue, but after being offended, they become silent, no longer open, and no longer want to be close as before. Some people don't scold anyone, but speak in a sharp, sarcastic, or mocking tone, or deliberately try to make others feel uncomfortable. Some people don't openly express anger, but harbor feelings of resentment, hurt, disrespect, or an inability to forgive. These emotions are easily overlooked because they are not loud. But in reality, this kind of simmering resentment is often more exhausting than an outburst of anger. A big outburst of anger can come and go, while silent resentment can last for days, months, or even years. It's like a thin layer of smoke constantly covering the mind, making people feel heavy, hesitant to open up, difficult to approach, and unable to feel true relief. Some relationships don't break down because of a big argument, but because of too much unspoken resentment. One person holds on to their feelings for too long. Person grows colder little by little. Person always appears normal but has accumulated too much bitterness inside. Then, at some point, the distance becomes too great and no one understands where it started. Very often, it begins with resentments that don't explode but are never transformed. Anger can also manifest as becoming more critical of others. When anger is present, people tend to be more fault-finding, more easily irritated, and more prone to strong reactions to ordinary things. An unintentional remark can be perceived as disrespectful. No mannered action can be interpreted as intentional. When anger is present, the way we view people and life is colored by that inner frustration. Therefore, the problem often lies not only in the circumstances, but also in the lingering resentment within ourselves. Why does anger often erupt so quickly? Because anger is closely linked to the ego. When feeling offended, denied, disrespected, or not getting what one wants, a rebellious mindset immediately arises. Often people think they are angry because someone else is wrong. But in reality, it's because their inner ego is being hurt. This is a very subtle point that is easily overlooked if not examined carefully. Most outbursts of anger don't arise from nowhere. They usually appear quickly when something touches upon one's ego. It could be a comment that makes one feel belittled. It could be an attitude that makes one feel disrespected. It could be a rejection that makes one feel denied. It could be someone not doing what they want, not acknowledging them, not treating them the way they think they deserve. At that moment, anger often arises almost immediately. It's so quick that we think it's a perfectly natural reaction to someone else's wrongdoing. But if we honestly look deeper, we often find that we're not only angry because the other person was wrong, but also because we've been touched on a very sensitive spot inside, a place that wants to be valued, a place that wants to be recognized, a place that wants to be right, a place that cannot tolerate feeling inferior, hurt, or ignored. Because anger is so closely tied to the ego, it often erupts faster than we realize. When the ego feels threatened, the rebellious mind immediately rises up as a defense mechanism. It wants to protect its image, its position, its viewpoint, its sense of right. Therefore, there are times when we think we are defending what is right. But in reality, most of the inner energy comes from protecting the ego. For example, there are arguments where, if we calm down, we realize we don't really need to win that much. But at that moment, anger makes it impossible to stop. It's not because the issue is too big, but because we can't stand the feeling of being contradicted. Sometimes we react very strongly to a comment that isn't particularly harsh, but it touches on an old wound or a deep-seated area of pride. Then the anger flares up with far greater force than the actual situation. Once we understand this, we begin to look deeper into our anger. It's not just about what the other person did, but also about which part of ourselves it touched. Did it touch our pride, our feelings of disrespect, our fear of being underestimated, or our need to always be right? That question is crucial because if we only look outward, we'll always see the reason for our anger as lying with the other person. But if we dare to look inward, we begin to understand why we are so easily swayed. That's also the first step in transforming anger. Not by pretending to be gentle, nor by forcing yourself not to be angry, but by gaining a deeper understanding of where anger originates. When you understand that many fits of anger are actually reactions of a wounded ego, you'll begin to identify less with the anger. You'll be less inclined to immediately trust every internal reaction. And from there, you'll have a little more space to avoid being instantly controlled by anger. Anger isn't just about being hot-tempered. It can be a coldness, a silent distance, a sarcastic remark, a hardening attitude, a lingering irritation, or a quick reaction when one's ego is challenged. Understanding this is a crucial step in the journey of inner self-improvement. Only by recognizing anger in its most subtle forms can one truly have the opportunity to live more mindfully and cause less suffering to oneself and others. There are things in life that, when they happen, people only need a few seconds to say, but it takes months, years, or even a lifetime to live with the consequences. Among these words spoken when anger is present are one of the most hurtful, because when anger flares up, people don't just speak to express themselves, but often speak to retaliate, to vent their frustration, to hurt the other person as they themselves are hurting. And it is at that moment that many things that shouldn't be said are actually said. Stories of how words can shatter relationships are not uncommon in life. There are relationships that were once very good, but a moment of anger, a harsh word, or an uncontrolled reaction can cause deep cracks. Sadly, many wounds inflicted by resentment cannot be repaired with a simple apology, because the wounds from words often linger for a long time. The most painful aspect of anger isn't always how intense the anger is, but rather how it often leads to words that strike directly at the most vulnerable parts of others. Normally, we might maintain some restraint, knowing what to hold back and what boundaries to avoid. But when anger flares up, reason is pushed aside, ego and emotions take control, and people easily use words as a weapon. There are words spoken in seconds that leave a lasting scar on the listener's heart. A demeaning remark, rebuke for past mistakes, a remark that hits a pain the other person is trying to hide, a remark that negates all the good things that once existed, a remark not made to solve a problem but to hurt the other person. Such words may not leave a physical mark, but they linger in memory and emotion for a long time. Many people, after their anger subsides, think that simply apologizing will make things go back to how they were. But in reality, not every wound heals just because the person who caused it regrets their actions. Some words can destroy trust. Some words can make people feel unsafe in a relationship. Some hurtful words don't cause people to leave immediately, but they gradually close themselves off, becoming less trusting, less approachable, and less willing to open up as before. In families, some parents, in their anger, say things to their children that seem like mere discipline in a moment of frustration, but unintentionally sow seeds of resentment that last a long time. In marriages, some couples who once loved each other deeply gradually erode their mutual respect through harsh words during arguments. In friendships, some close friends of many years can be shattered by a single moment of uncontrolled anger. Sadly, many relationships could have been saved before they broke down if one of the two people involved had known when to stop sooner. Therefore, anger is not only dangerous because it causes suffering in the moment, but also because it can destroy things we once cherished in just 1 minute of losing our composure. Many people don't lose relationships because they've stopped loving, but because they repeatedly let anger override their rationality. But it is also in this life that we see a very different kind of strength. Not the strength of reacting quickly, retaliating to get revenge, or responding quickly, but the strength of knowing when to stop anger. Conversely, there are people who are misunderstood, insulted, or face unpleasant situations, but they know when to stop, not react immediately, and not let anger lead them astray. That stopping has saved an argument, saved a relationship, and sometimes even saved a major turning point in life. This is a very profound lesson, because in moments of hurt, pride, misunderstanding, or unfair treatment, reacting immediately is often the easiest thing to do. Anyone can immediately say what they're angry about. Anyone can retaliate to relieve their resentment. Anyone can use sharp words to protect the pain inside. But not everyone is level-headed enough to stop at the right moment. Some people, even when angry, can clearly feel the heat rising within them. But instead of speaking up immediately, they choose to remain silent for a few minutes. They choose to step away for a while. They choose to give themselves time to cool down before returning. Some people are misunderstood but don't rush to argue at all costs when both are heated. Some people are insulted but know that if they react in anger, they might say something they'll regret later. That pause may seem small on the surface, but it represents a significant form of maturity, requires not letting anger take over immediately. It demands the awareness to recognize that anger is present, and that letting it lead you astray could ruin something far more important than winning or losing in that moment. There are arguments that didn't escalate simply because one person chose to stay silent at the right time. There are relationships that were saved because one person didn't text while fuming. There are decisions that didn't become huge mistakes because someone knew to wait a night before replying. In many cases, what saves a relationship isn't who's right, but who's level-headed enough not to let anger destroy what's worth preserving. People who know when to stop their anger aren't those who don't feel pain, hurt, or have no reaction. They still get hurt, still feel sad, still feel angry, and still have moments when they want to say a lot. But they understand that emotions are real, and how they react to those emotions is what determines the consequences. They don't let a moment of anger decide the fate of a relationship that has lasted for years. That's a very profound kind of strength. It's not loud, not ostentatious, but strong enough to preserve the most precious things in human life. Because sometimes maturity isn't about how many right things you can say, but about knowing that there are things you desperately want to say, but shouldn't when your heart is filled with anger. And perhaps one of the clearest ways to see the power of inner cultivation is not when life is peaceful, but in the moment when anger is rising and one is still clear-headed enough to stop. Just one timely pause is often enough to save many things that seem on the verge of being lost. There's a paradox in human inner life. When angry, we often feel that if we don't speak out, react, or release our anger, the burden will only intensify. Therefore, many believe that anger is a way to relieve stress, that venting it will make us feel lighter, that speaking our minds will solve everything. But if we observe more closely, we'll see that releasing anger doesn't always bring peace. Often, after the anger subsides, what remains isn't relief, but exhaustion, regret, headaches, insomnia, and an unpleasant emptiness inside. This shows that anger not only hurts others, but first and foremost, it burns the person who harbors it. Why do people who are often angry suffer so much? Those who are quick to anger often think they are relieving themselves, but in reality, they are the first to be burned. Anger causes mental unrest, physical fatigue, poor sleep, strained relationships, and rapidly depletes vital energy. Holding on to anger for too long is like holding hot coals in your heart. The image of hugging a burning coal perfectly illustrates the nature of anger. When anger arises, no matter who you throw it at, your own hand will always get burned first. Someone might annoy you for a few minutes, but if you hold on to that anger for hours, days, or even years, the greatest suffering clearly remains within your own heart. People who are constantly filled with anger and resentment often find it difficult to achieve true inner peace. Outwardly, they may seem normal, going to work, talking, and living as if nothing is wrong. But inside, a constant stream of intense, tense, rebellious, or unpleasant emotions flows silently. Just a small displeasure, an insensitive remark, or an unexpected action can easily trigger a reaction. Living in this state for a long time makes it very difficult for a person to find true relief. Anger first causes inner turmoil. People burdened with anger often find it difficult to relax deeply. Even when sitting still, their minds easily replay past events, past words, and past attitudes of someone. Some people appear silent on the outside but argue all night long inside. Some people go about their normal lives, but their hearts are always like a small flame, waiting for something to ignite it. Such inner peace is very difficult to achieve. Not only the mind, but the body is also significantly affected. A person who frequently lives in prolonged anger or resentment is often easily tired, prone to muscle tension, headaches, restless sleep, and difficulty recovering energy. This is because anger is not just an emotion, it is a state of rigidity in both body and mind. When angry, the body tenses up, breathing changes, and energy is disrupted. If this happens repeatedly, vitality is gradually eroded without the person even realizing it. Sleep is also a place where the earth leaves its mark very clearly. Many people can't sleep peacefully, not just because they're busy, but because there are still so many things in their hearts they haven't let go of. They're still angry at someone. They're still bitter about something. They're still resentful about a past event. They're still reacting to something that didn't go their way. The body may lie down, but the mind refuses to rest. And when the mind doesn't rest, it's very difficult for a person to truly recover. Relationships are also places where resentment can silently erode very quickly. People who are constantly resentful often suffer alone, easily causing those around them to live in a state of apprehension, heaviness, or uncertainty about when they might encounter the next unpleasant situation. While they aren't always bad people, living near someone who is constantly resentful is exhausting. The atmosphere around them is easily tense, cold, and pressure-filled. Over time, this causes them to lose closeness, trust, and often isolate themselves from positive connections. The inner workings of family and close relationships offer a particularly thought-provoking lesson. The place where people are most likely to harbor resentment isn't in society at large, but rather with those closest to them. The closer the relationship, the more easily expectations are placed, the more easily hurt feelings are felt, and the more easily control is lost. Often we are considerate towards outsiders, but our loved ones bear the brunt of our worst emotions. This is a very real paradox. In public, people tend to be more restrained. With colleagues, strangers, clients, and those not very close to them, we tend to choose our words more carefully, control our reactions better, and try harder to maintain our image. But when we get home, to the people we think are closest to us, who understand us best and accept us best, we are most likely to let our guard down. Because of this closeness, expectations are also higher. We expect our loved ones to understand us without needing many words. We expect them to be more sensitive. We expect them to side with us. We expect them to behave in a way we deem reasonable. We expect them not to hurt us. And when those things don't happen, anger often arises very quickly, because it's not just a reaction to the current situation, but also a reaction to the shattered expectations within. Within a family, an unpleasant remark can hurt far more than a similar comment from an outsider. A cold attitude from a loved one can cause deeper emotional wounds. A lack of understanding from someone you love can easily provoke a stronger reaction. Precisely because these relationships are so important, resentment within them can leave more profound consequences. Often, outsiders receive the most polite version of us, while loved ones have to bear the burden of our most tired, irritable, vulnerable, and impatient side. It's not because we hate them more, but because we've become too accustomed to venting our anger in what we consider a safe place. Ironically, those who feel safest are often the ones most hurt by our anger. A child may remember their parents' annoyed gaze for a long time. A spouse may grow weary of constantly enduring tense reactions from their loved one. A familial relationship may cool down not because love has faded, but because of too many repeated outbursts of anger without either party taking responsibility. Therefore, understanding the environment is not only about reducing anger in real life, but also about carefully observing how we are channeling that energy into the places closest to us. Because the place that deserves kindness the most is sometimes the place we hurt the most. The saying, "Those who are resentful suffer a lot," is not a judgment, but a truth worth realizing. Suffering doesn't just come from others annoying you, but from letting that fire burn in your heart for too long. And if you don't learn to see, understand, and transform it, the first, most silently, and longest-lasting victim will always be yourself. There are things in the heart that don't immediately erupt into a great outburst of anger, but instead silently grow day by day, with each small clash, each dissatisfaction, each feeling of being hurt without being recognized. That's how anger often manifests in real life. It's not always a violent outburst, a big argument, or an overtly aggressive reaction. Often, anger begins very subtly, very small, very ordinary. And because it's so subtle, people easily overlook it, easily ignore it, until it becomes a part of how they think, how they see people, and how they react to life. Signs that anger is silently growing include easily getting annoyed by small things, feeling irritated when receiving criticism, reacting strongly, thinking negatively about others, finding it difficult to forgive, or constantly harboring resentment. If these things are not recognized early, they will gradually make the mind heavier and more withdrawn. One of the most noticeable signs is that you start getting easily irritated by very small things. It could be just someone not responding as expected, a message arriving late, words spoken in a tone not what you hoped, small thing being done slightly differently, an action that displeases you in daily life. If your mind is open, these things are just minor issues. But when anger has silently grown, people are easily triggered by things that are not worth such a strong reaction to. It's noteworthy that at that moment, people often don't think they're angry. They just think they're annoyed, tired, disrespected, annoyed. But in reality, these overly sensitive reactions to small things are signals that a layer of resentment is already building up inside. The small thing is just a minor trigger. The fire has been there all along. Another very common sign is discomfort when receiving feedback. When someone points out something that isn't good, instead of reflecting on whether there's any truth to it, the mind reacts immediately. Feelings of being offended, denied, criticized, or belittled arise very quickly. And instead of listening, people easily become defensive, retaliate, or harbor prolonged resentment. Anger often manifests not only through shouting or arguing, but also through aggressive reactions. Some people's tone of voice changes instantly, their gaze shifts, their facial expression hardens, and their responses become sharper, colder, or more defensive. These things often happen so quickly and become so commonplace that the person involved no longer finds them unusual. But if you look deeper, it's a sign that their heart is no longer soft, open, or calm enough to accept differences wisely. Anger also grows when we start thinking negatively about others. When someone displeases us, instead of focusing on a specific action, we easily expand it into a negative view of their entire being. From one instance of tactless speech, we begin to think they are mean. From one instance of not helping as we hoped, we begin to think they are selfish. From one instance of hurting us, we begin to see them through a layer of lasting prejudice. Anger loves to highlight the faults of others and obscures the ability to see things fairly. Another very deep-seated sign is difficulty in forgiving. There are things that happened long ago, but they still linger in the heart. You still remember, you still hurt, you're still angry, you still occasionally replay them in your mind. You still feel like you haven't truly let go. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting everything or moving on, but if the heart still holds on to bitterness, it shows that resentment is still there. It's just that it no longer erupts, but is transformed into a hard, silent layer within. And perhaps one of the clearest manifestations is the constant feeling of resentment. It doesn't always erupt, but there's always a heavy feeling inside, a little discomfort, a little dissatisfaction with someone or something. This feeling persists, causing people to gradually become more withdrawn, less trusting, more defensive, and less able to live as lightly as before. If not recognized early on, these seemingly small things will gradually weigh down the mind and make it more closed off. Initially, it's just irritability. Then it becomes aloofness. Gradually, it becomes difficulty opening up, trusting people, empathizing, and seeing the good in others. Anger doesn't just make you angry for a moment. It can also subtly change a person's inner structure if left unchecked for too long. Why does anger cloud people's judgment? When anger arises, it's difficult for the mind to be clear. People are more likely to say things they'll regret, do things they don't really want to do, and see things through a distorted emotional lens. In anger, we often don't see right from wrong clearly, but only see ourselves as hurt or opposed. This is a very important point from a spiritual perspective. Many people think that they are angry but still clear-headed. They are upset but still right. They react strongly because they are justified. But in reality, when anger takes control, wisdom is often very strongly obscured. When anger arises, the ego and painful emotions are pushed to the forefront. While the ability to see the bigger picture narrows, we no longer see the story clearly, but only the part of ourselves that is upset. We no longer listen to what the other person is saying with openness, but only with a defensive mindset. We no longer see things from multiple perspectives, but only through the lens of hurt, pride, or resistance. That's why when angry, people easily say things they'll regret. There are things they would never say normally, but in a fit of anger, they blurt out quickly. There are actions they would think wrong when calm, but when consumed by anger, they act as if they have no other choice. Later, when their minds calm down, they feel regret, realize their mistakes, and think they could have done things differently. But by then, the consequences have often already occurred. Anger also distorts how we perceive people and situations. When angry, we easily exaggerate others' mistakes, attribute malicious motives, and think in the most negative light. A normal remark can be interpreted as insulting. Clumsy action can be taken as intentional. Silence can be interpreted as contempt. This isn't because the truth is always like that, but because anger is coloring the way we see things. When anger clouds our minds, we often lose sight of right and wrong, seeing only ourselves as hurt or opposed. This is crucial because many strong reactions don't stem from truth or justice, but from a feeling that our ego has been hurt. Not recognizing this, people easily use anger as a justification for their unwise reactions. Therefore, recognizing anger isn't about self-blame, but about beginning to see your true self more clearly. Only by recognizing these small signs early on can you prevent them from growing into a silent fire that burns away your wisdom, your peace, and the most beautiful aspects of your relationships. Some things in life don't break down in a major event, but gradually deteriorate from small, repeated reactions each day. And anger, if left undetected, is one such thing. Anger isn't something that can simply disappear just because we know it's bad. Many people understand very well that anger will ruin things, hurt others, and lead to regret. But when anger truly arises, all that understanding weakens. This shows that transforming anger isn't just about rational understanding, but a very real training process in every small reaction of daily life. To reduce anger, people can't wait until it explodes before trying to fix it. They must learn to recognize it very early, From the moment it's just a nascent, unpleasant feeling appearing in their hearts. The method for identifying and transforming anger? The first step is to learn to recognize anger as soon as it arises. Don't wait until it explodes to deal with it. Practice stopping, breathing slowly, remaining silent for a few minutes, not reacting immediately, and asking yourself, what within you is being affected? By looking deeply into the root of anger, you will be less controlled by it. This is a crucial step because most people only realize they're angry when it's too late, when their voice has risen, when harsh words have been spoken, when a scathing message has been sent, when the atmosphere is tense, when the relationship has been damaged. But in reality, anger rarely comes at such a high level right away. It usually has a very short but crucial phase, which is when it first arises. It could be that fleeting moment when your heart races upon hearing something you don't like. It's the tightness in your chest when you're misunderstood. It's the slight discomfort that arises when someone behaves differently than you expect. It's the quick reaction when you receive criticism or your pride is hurt. With enough practice, you can recognize these early signals. And it is at that stage that you still have a chance to prevent anger from escalating too far. The important thing is not to wait until it explodes before taking action, because once the fire is burning big, it becomes much harder to put it out. But if you recognize it when it's just a small spark, you can save a lot. So what should you do in that moment? The first thing is to stop. It sounds simple, but it's a very powerful skill. Stopping doesn't mean avoiding the issue or being weak. Stopping means refusing to let anger take control immediately. It means not letting the emotions that have just arisen instantly turn into words or actions. There are arguments that haven't escalated simply because one person knew when to stop. Next, practice slow breathing. When anger arises, both body and mind become tense. Breathing often becomes faster, the body stiffens, and the mind reacts more quickly. Slow breathing won't solve all problems, but it creates a valuable buffer between emotion and action. Just a few slow, deep, even breaths can help prevent you from being immediately swept away by instinctive reactions. Being silent for a few minutes is also a very important practice. Not everything needs an immediate response. Not every misunderstanding needs to be explained instantly. Not every annoyance needs to be expressed at that particular moment. Sometimes the wisest thing to do is not to say the right thing quickly, but to remain silent until you are calm enough to say the right thing in a way that won't make things worse. Not reacting immediately is one of the most practical ways to transform anger. Many consequences in life don't stem from anger itself, but from how we react while angry. If we can control that reaction, anger will become much less powerful. And a very important question to ask yourself at that moment is, what within you is being touched? This is where the shift is from fighting the anger to understanding it. Because often, what makes you angry isn't just the other person's actions, but a wound, an expectation, a wounded pride, or a feeling of being disregarded that's been touched. Sometimes you're angry not because the words were too harsh, but because they hit a spot where you're already vulnerable. Sometimes you react strongly not because the issue is too serious, but because you've already accumulated too much pressure, fatigue, or unaddressed hurt inside. When we look deep into the root of anger, we become less controlled by it. Because then we no longer just see the other person's wrongdoing, but begin to see the part within ourselves that is hurting or clinging. And when we see that part, anger will become less absolute, less justified in our eyes, and therefore less powerful. Practices to reduce anger in daily life: get enough sleep, reduce stress, limit reactions when tired or hungry, practice listening instead of immediately arguing, and most importantly, learn to let go of expectations of others. Many outbursts of anger don't stem from unreasonable behavior from others, but from our own demand that life always go our way. This is a very practical part, because anger isn't just a spiritual or moral issue. It's also very much related to how we live our daily lives. Some people think they're short-tempered, but in reality they're just exhausted from prolonged stress. Some people think they're difficult, but in reality they're accumulating too much pressure without a healthy way to release it. Getting enough sleep may seem like a small thing, but it's very important. When the body lacks rest, the mind tends to be less resilient, more irritable, and more reactive. A person who is chronically tired finds it difficult to develop deep patience. Therefore, to reduce anger, sometimes it's not just about cultivating the mind, but also about taking care of the body. Reducing stress is also a very practical way to lessen anger. Many outbursts of anger don't erupt because of the specific situation, but because they are the final straw after a long series of pent-up emotions. When people are overloaded, stressed, and lack healthy release channels, even a small conflict can easily cause everything to overflow. Therefore, learning to rest at the right time, expressing your fatigue, and reducing the amount of burdens or emotions you carry are all part of cultivating anger. Limiting your reactions when you're tired or hungry is a very important principle to remember. When your body's weak, your mind is often more prone to distortion. At such times, you're more likely to misunderstand, exaggerate, and say things you shouldn't. If you realize you're too tired, too hungry, or too stressed, sometimes the wisest thing to do is not to address the problem immediately, but to allow yourself to recover first. Practicing listening instead of immediately refuting is also a profound practice. When anger arises, the first instinct is often to interrupt, explain, argue, or prove oneself right. But if you practice listening completely, listening slowly, listening to understand instead of listening to retaliate, many outbursts of anger will naturally subside. This is because many misunderstandings are nurtured not because the issue is too big, but because no one is truly listening to anyone else. And perhaps most importantly, we need to learn to let go of our expectations of others. This is a very deep-seated root of much anger. We get angry because others don't live up to our expectations. They don't understand us as we expect. They aren't as sensitive as we expect. They don't react as we expect. They don't love as we expect. But the truth of life is that no one can always follow the map in their head. Many outbursts of anger don't stem from others being unreasonable, but from our insistence that life always go our way. When expectations are too rigid, even a slight deviation from reality triggers a negative reaction. Conversely, when we stop clinging to the idea that everything must be exactly as we want it to be, our hearts become much softer. This doesn't mean accepting every unreasonable thing, but rather stopping demanding that others, circumstances, and life always perfectly fit our desires. Transforming anger isn't about becoming someone who never gets angry. That's unrealistic. Transforming anger is about not letting anger get the better of you. It's about having emotions but not losing your composure. It's about reacting but not harming what's precious. It's about being hurt but knowing when to look inward instead of just reacting. And perhaps, a truly mature person isn't someone who has never experienced anger, but rather someone who recognizes anger earlier, understands it more deeply, and lets it pass more easily. That's a very real, very ordinary, and very valuable form of self-cultivation. There are periods in life when people aren't necessarily experiencing major life events, but they live in a state of extreme exhaustion. Even a small thing can make them irritable. A gentle word can cause discomfort. A single disappointment can weigh heavily on their entire day. Many people think they're just stressed, busy, or misunderstood. But if you look deeper, there might be a small, persistent fire burning inside resentment. It doesn't always erupt into arguments, but it constantly smolders within. Because it smolders, it easily becomes a way of life without them realizing it. A practical lesson for the audience: if you're feeling irritable, annoyed, or experiencing some kind of discomfort today, perhaps what you need isn't to win an argument, but to learn how to calm yourself down. Because when your mind is at peace, many seemingly big problems will naturally become smaller. This is a very real lesson, because most of the anger in life doesn't actually help us solve problems better. It only makes the problem more tense, the words sharper, the distance greater, and our hearts more weary. Many people try to win an argument, but ultimately lose out on their own peace of mind. There are times when we speak our minds, react impulsively, prove ourselves. But afterwards, there's a very uncomfortable void. Because what we think we need is victory, but what we actually lack is inner peace. If you're feeling irritable today, don't just look outward to find out who's bothering you. Try turning inward a little to ask yourself what's going on inside. Are you too tired? You carrying too much pressure without rest? You holding on to unspoken feelings? Are you expecting too much from others? Are you hurting somewhere and haven't looked into it? Often, what we need most isn't another argument to prove us right, but a moment of quiet reflection to understand why we're so easily provoked. Anger is often just the tip of the iceberg. Its root often lies in lingering fatigue, unhealed wounds, unfulfilled expectations, or an ego in need of self-reflection. Learning to calm yourself down is a crucial skill in modern life. Calming down doesn't mean swallowing everything down, nor does it mean letting anyone do whatever they want. Calming down means knowing when to stop, knowing when to slow your breathing, knowing when to stop talking, knowing when to leave a conversation for a while, knowing when to put something aside overnight before responding.
Knowing.
When you're not clear-headed enough to handle a problem in the best way. When the mind is at peace, many seemingly big problems will naturally become smaller. This isn't just a self-consolation saying, but a profound truth. There are things that seem unbearable when we're angry, but after a few hours or a night of calm, our perspective changes. Some words may initially sound offensive, but when the mind settles, we realize the other person was simply being clumsy or facing their own difficulties. Some conflicts may seem very serious at first, but when anger is no longer blinding us, we realize that the most important thing isn't winning or losing, but maintaining respect and understanding. People with inner strength aren't those who are never hurt. They still experience sadness, anger, frustration, and hurt at times. But the difference is that they don't let those emotions immediately turn into actions that ruin everything. They know how to calm themselves before dealing with others. They know how to keep their minds from being blinded by anger. In summary, the profound meaning of anger in Buddhism is not merely superficial rage, but an inner fire that can burn down many good things if one doesn't recognize it in time. Transforming anger isn't about becoming weak, but about becoming a person with inner strength. Knowing how to maintain a clear mind and not letting momentary emotions ruin important long-term matters, this is something worth reflecting on. Many people mistakenly believe that reducing anger means reducing aggression, less reaction means defeat, and that staying calm means weakness. But in reality, reacting immediately is often the easiest thing to do. Maintaining composure while being provoked is far more difficult. Anyone can get angry. Anyone can retort. Anyone can explode when misunderstood or treated unfairly. But not everyone has the inner strength to stop at the right time, reflect appropriately, and preserve the light within themselves. In Buddhism, anger is considered one of the three poisons, not just because it causes temporary discomfort, but because of its immense destructive power. It can destroy a long-standing relationship with just a few words. It can shatter the trust others place in you with a single moment of losing control. It can destroy your own efforts in self-cultivation if you let it lead you too far. And even more profoundly, it can destroy the clarity of mind, causing people to become increasingly defensive, bitter, withdrawn, and further away from peace. But the good news is that the fire isn't insurmountable. If people are willing to look within themselves, be honest about what's silently burning inside, stop a little sooner, be a little gentler, and understand a little more deeply, then that fire can gradually die down. It won't be gone overnight. But each time we realize it sooner, react more slowly, speak more gently, and let go more, that's a very valuable step forward. Transforming anger isn't about becoming someone who's always meek and submissive, enduring everything. It's about becoming someone with inner strength. A person with inner strength is someone who knows right from wrong, but doesn't let anger distort their behavior. They know how to protect themselves without resorting to venomous words. They know how to maintain their stance, but don't lose their clarity of mind and humanity when facing conflict. There are things in life that, once accidentally broken, are very difficult to get back to their original state. A harsh word, an uncontrolled reaction, letting anger lead you too far. Therefore, maintaining a clear mind is not an abstract concept, but a very practical and essential life skill. If you're feeling frustrated, resentful, or angry today, don't just try to suppress or vent your anger. Try looking at it more closely. It might not be a sign that you're a bad person, but rather a reminder that there's something inside you that needs understanding, healing, and calming. And who knows? Perhaps it's from that moment of turning inward and calming yourself that a part of your peace will begin to return. Life will always present unexpected challenges, unpleasant people, and emotionally upsetting situations. But what determines peace isn't whether the outside world is pleasant or not, but whether we are mindful enough not to let anger lead us astray. If you find this video thought-provoking, please like, share, Subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to spread life lessons that bring peace of mind and a lighter life every day.